Hi, everybody. I'm Pete Christensen,
I'm Coffee Brown.
and welcome to episode 22 of
Don't Die Dumb.
We're going to start out talking about the possible existence of aliens in the universe. This was brought up because
So Barack Obama, in a recent interview, was asked, do you think aliens are real? And he said, yes, aliens are real. And the internet just blew up over that. If you actually go online and watch the clip, it's pretty clear that what he meant was, how could they not be? The universe is full of stars. Stars are full of planets. Why would we be the only place that has life? But it got spun as the ex-president admits that aliens are real, and so now everybody thinks that he's made an admission about Area 51 and stuff. And Trump ordered the release of a whole bunch of UFO files, which is not going to have anything important on them.
and those aren't the files everybody wants released. There's another
Right.
set. But
I'm sure it's not a distraction from the Epstein files. I'm positive it has nothing to do with getting people, look over there.
Yeah.
I don't think it's that at all.
But getting back to alien life,
Yeah.
aren't there 88 million stars in our galaxy, the Milky Way galaxy alone?
So we can only estimate because there's
Yeah.
a lot of stars. It's hard to count them all. It would take more than all day. But estimates are between 100 million and 400 million, 100 billion and 400 billion stars in our galaxy.
So the idea that
Well,
none
it
of
gets
them
better.
could sustain life is
Right.
the odd. A Vegas odd maker wouldn't take those.
And that's out of 200 billion to 400 billion galaxies that we know
Yeah.
of. So, and this is super interesting to me. We've been discovering planets now around other stars for 20 years or so. And the first few were terribly exciting. But what we're finding is that almost every stellar system that we can answer the question for has planets. Some of them are so far away we can't really tell, things like that, or they're on the other side of a nebula, so it's hard to see them. But for the ones we can see, it's starting to look like there's always planets around stars. And that makes sense. It's tough to explain in words, but you can easily look up a YouTube and look up stellar disk formation, and it will show you how stars and planets form out of just debris in space. It's all driven by gravity, but one of the consequences of everything falling together by gravity is that it picks up a spin. And the faster it spins, the more it flattens out and becomes a plate, which is why solar systems are on a plane. And what's actually more interesting is when planets like Pluto are not in the same plane as everybody else in the solar system, it implies they might have got hit by something in the past, because the disk is always going to be a plane. So the notion that star formation almost universally means planet formation is starting to look pretty solid. And when we talk about planets that can support life, most people mean life as we know it,
Yeah.
which means in the Goldilocks zone, defined by a distance from that star. Different stars have different distances because some are hotter, some are colder. But a distance from that star where water will exist as a liquid. Too close and it's steam, it's a gas. Too far away and it's ice. And for life as we know it, water has to exist as a liquid. But there's a number of, so first of all, that's a lot more common than we thought it was. Second of all, there's a lot more forms of life than just the ones we would be familiar with, including here on Earth. We have extremophiles. There are microbes that live in the magma below the Earth's crust. So the notion that life on other planets would have to be life as we know it is pretty limiting. And we know that life started on this planet really, really early, more than 4 billion years ago. And it looks like when people try to replicate in a laboratory how they think life got started, it looks like it's pretty straightforward. In fact, the most surprising thing to me is that it seems to have started only once on our planet. We should have life forms that aren't based on DNA because life should have begun more than once. My guess is it did, but the DNA descendants wiped out all the other forms.
The movie Ghostbusters, now get this, was actually taken from Dan Aykroyd's brother, who is the head of a group and one of the foremost authorities on UFOs in all of Canada called Mythbreakers. And
not to be confused with Mythbusters.
Yes. And there is a documentary. They take an hour, and a little over an hour, and they talk to Dan Aykroyd. They catch him before his show in a hotel room, and he just sits there and talks for an hour about everything he knows about UFOs. And then the director went back and did B-roll. He overlapped video of all the UFOs that he's talking about, the incidents. And the conclusion is that it is so in-depth and so accurate and so backed up that if you ever go to Roswell, when you read all of the depositions by people that said, I saw things, I witnessed things, and I was threatened with my life. When you read them all by senators, congressmen, policemen, Air Force people, when you read them all, if you don't believe in UFOs when you go in, you just might when you come out. Now, for years, the media's all said, well, if there were UFOs, don't you think the media would have found it? Come on, you can't find someone's grandma when she's been abducted, but you think you could find UFOs? That's just arrogant, in my opinion. I think that people get so obtuse with their idea that only we can do it, that they're not open-minded. I think we need to be open-minded with UFOs. Whether you believe in aliens from other planets or not, at least be open-minded to the idea that other life forms might exist.
So I'm in the other camp, actually. I don't think Earth has been visited by UFOs or aliens. Oh, and that was the thing I was going to say earlier, by the way. When we speculate about intelligent life, when we say life on other planets, we mean intelligent life. But, I mean, there could be microbes or grasses or trees or something. And when we say intelligent life, we assume that they would do the kinds of techno things that we do, but they could have very different psychologies. I think we probably have not been visited, but that doesn't change my very strong belief that there's a bunch of life out there in the universe, just on mathematical grounds. So my warrant is a thing called, we're going to talk about why I think they haven't visited and why I might be wrong. So the argument for there being a bunch of life out there often comes down to something you'll hear about called the Drake equation, which is basically if there's this many stars and each star we think has this many planets on average in what we would call a habitable range, and there's this many galaxies and there's this much time since on average the stars are this old and we think life takes about this long to get started, you can multiply all those numbers out and say here's how many civilizations we would expect there to be in the galaxy. And even when those numbers are set pretty low, you're starting with such gigantic numbers to begin with, that it's in the billions. So that leads to the Fermi paradox, the other thing you'll hear about. So the Drake equation strongly favors that there's not only life out there, but lots of it. But the Fermi paradox is, well, then why haven't we heard from them? Shouldn't we see radio waves or TV signals or electromagnetic signals that clearly are carrying information? And that's what Project SETI is looking for. And there are a lot of people have come up with a lot of different answers to the Drake equation. Some of them are pretty sinister. If you watch or read The Three-Body Problem by Cixin Liu, he addresses that in a pretty dark and scary way. But all my life, I've heard about Eskimos. I actually believe there are Eskimos. I think there's a North Pole, and there's Eskimos living up there, in the Arctic Circle, hunting seals and stuff. But I have never met one, nor have I ever gotten a radio transmission from one. Why not? If they're really Eskimos, then this is the coffee paradox. Why haven't I heard from them? We're in a remote outer fringe of the galaxy. And another argument for why we might never see or hear from these people is that at the present state of physics, it is still thought that nothing can go faster than the speed of light. If that's true, then the chances of a visit are vanishingly small. I don't rule out the idea that there may be some workaround in the future, but right now there does not appear to be. So, yes, I think the universe is teeming with life. No, I don't think it's ever visited us. But I don't think the Fermi paradox rules out life. That's my take on it.
The band the Foo Fighters stands for Flaming Orange Objects. During World War II, we had fighter planes and jet pilots that were assigned specifically to figure out where these flaming orange objects came from. That could be in back of them 1 second, in front of them in the next, and then gone after that. And after the war, we came to the conclusion that they were advanced technology being used by the Germans. After the war, we found out the Germans thought we had the advanced technology.
Well, arguing against myself, I believe, and everybody I know believes in atoms, but nobody has seen them, although IBM has produced a few pictures that are ostensibly of atoms. On the other hand, tens of thousands of people claim to have personally been abducted by aliens and diddled with in unpleasant ways. So, if we're going by eyewitness accounts, the evidence would be for aliens and against atoms. It's tricky deciding what counts as evidence and what doesn't, and I don't feel dismissive of people who think we have been visited. I just personally am not in the club.
Very well. Let's change the subject now, move on to money. How important is money? I mean, obviously it's the life flow of the economy, but individually, off the camera, we were talking earlier, I was saying I grew up very, very poor farm family. And I realized that I've been poor all my life, even as an entertainer. There were about 10 years when I had it rolling in so much I couldn't spend it fast enough, even if I wanted to. But a couple of divorces cured me of that real quick. But I realized that I was just as happy with the money as without it. I've learned to live somewhat austere. And if you go to some areas where they've been hit hard by economic collapse, maybe a factory goes out of business, or they move a company, or they've rallied out a mine to where there's nothing left in it, you'll see snowmobiles, motorcycles, second cars. All their toys go up for sale in their front yard. But are these people still happy? And do you need, of course we need the basics, the 5 basics. And I'm afraid right now, because we keep balancing the budget on the backs of the middle class, and that in 1 year, we've gone up $7 trillion more in debt, that we're going to destroy the middle class. We're all going to be poor and work for nothing, while the 1% has 90% of the income. Do you need money to be happy? And don't forget the old communist idea. Well, if they have love, they have everything. They have no shoes. Well, they're in love. Well, they're all starving. Yeah, but they have their family. They love their family. Pleased with that. That's the other extreme. Your thoughts?
Money is important when you're starting out and when you don't have it. But what fools people is we work so hard to find a way to make a living and to earn enough and to feel secure in terms of things like housing and food and utilities, that once we finally get to a point where we have enough, we never learned how to chase anything except money. The problem isn't that we have to chase money. You do have to chase it if you don't have enough. The problem is that your goal should be to get enough money to set your sights higher. But for some people, they never can think about anything except where they're going to get more money. And so you wind up with people who are clearly richer than they ever... You wind up with an Elon Musk who thinks he needs $1 trillion a year for a salary because, the guy's got bills. He's got 11 kids. He needs $1 trillion a year. The trap is that we form our attitudes during a time in our life when money is actually the problem we have to solve. And we have no general culturally accepted way of saying, oh, I've solved it, or at least I've solved it enough, I can start thinking about what's really important to me. So my pitch is that if you want a happy life, one that you're satisfied with when you get to the back end of it, right at the beginning, when you're working minimum wage jobs and wishing you had more hours, already be thinking, what would it take for me to think about something more interesting and more important than money? What do I need to get to that?
People will always say, well, look at these millionaires. Look at what they've done. The Carnegie Foundation, these other foundations, all these charities, these wonderful philanthropists. You know what they're doing? They're they're near the end of their lives and they want to be remembered. For some reason, that's a big deal with people. I hope everybody remembers me, please. But they're trying to buy remembrance. They're trying to buy a better reputation than they've earned, in my opinion.
I just go around pissing people off. They never stop talking about you if you do
There you
that.
go.
Well, the wealthy do create things like Carnegie Hall, but their philanthropy, while it can be enormous in absolute dollars, is actually less percentage-wise than poor people. Poor people donate more of their income to other poor people than rich people donate. And Bill Gates, who is numerically one of the biggest philanthropists in history, is percentage-wise one of the smallest, or was until the Gates Foundation. I think that's actually changed, but for a long time that was true.
But that's his wife.
Well, it's both of them.
Yeah.
They both separately have continued Gates Foundation activities.
Americans are, in my opinion, some of the most generous people you ever meet, but they can't give money most of the time, especially now. What they can give is time. If there's a businessman that started, he has a cargo plane, and he's in a poor area, and he tells people, I don't want your money. I'll pay for the jet fuel. All you have to do is give me discarded things. They're still useful. You know, he's had to buy 3 more planes because so many poor people give him shoes, clothes, utensils, you name it. Because Americans are very generous. I always thought they should take those lists of kids writing to Santa asking for, and almost 90% of those, they don't ask for anything for themselves. They ask for their parents or their relatives.
Yeah. I've met a lot of those kids. Yeah, I did that.
They should make those public so
Yeah.
people can fulfill them. I think most people would.
You know, it's interesting. We have wedding registers. Maybe some sort of register for, I don't know, deserving families or something. Now, I'm having flashbacks to an old TV show. Most of the people watching will not remember this. It was early days of television. It was called Queen for a Day. And these mothers, these household, housewives would get on, and they'd say, my kid has Alzheimer's or autism or some sort of thing like rickets, and my husband lost his job, and I'm going blind, and my life is terrible in all these ways. And whoever told the most pathetic story would be queen for a day, and they'd get a washing machine and a refrigerator and a new mop and things like that. And on the one hand, it was a chance for audiences to vote on who they'd like to help. On the other hand, it was a story in which people had to trot out how terrible their lives were in order to get sympathy. So if we had something like a wedding register, but like for deserving families, in the vision I'm having at this moment, it would be about the thing. For example, I have a friend who almost every minute of this guy's life, he's going around helping everybody in his neighborhood. He fixes things for all the old ladies in his neighborhood, and he drives the young people to their appointments, and he shows up to make dinner for a neighbor of his who often isn't up to making her own dinner and so on. And I mean, this guy's entire life is taking care of everybody around him. I would like to see these stories be not queen for a day, here's how sad my life is, but here's how much I'm contributing despite having no resources. And I think it's inspiring because you don't need a lot of resources to be a good person.
Yeah, I'll never understand. I suggested this when I was working in TV. We had these stories about a house that got burnt down and the people are homeless now, and that's the story, and possibly of why it happened. But I would like to see a TV station say, look, if you want to donate, go to our website and you can help these people. And they never do. I'll never understand why they don't push that a little further.
And positive psychology, this is actually the scientific research of what makes us happier, something I'm actually pretty involved in these days. One of the things that shows up over and over is that when you extend yourself for other people, you feel better. And I've certainly experienced that, haven't you?
Oh, of course, yeah.
In fact, we were going to stay off of the heavy topics this week, but I want to touch a little bit on the idea that there's actually a gospel now. There's actually like a Christian gospel of empathy is a sin. Empathy is bad. And one of their mantras is you shouldn't have to set yourself on fire to warm the person next to you. And I agree. If somebody says you should set yourself on fire to warm the person next to you, you should say, no, thank you. But come on, that's a far cry from saying, buying a homeless person a meal or helping somebody out with a bus ticket or something, right? There's a lot of ways we can help each other. What they're really talking about is taxes. They're equating paying taxes into a system that has a support network. They're equating that with setting yourself on fire to warm the person next to you. And the bizarre thing is, if they actually understood what positive psychology is finding out, they would realize that helping the person next to you will make you feel warmer.
If you want to be richer, create a richer society. That's why I thought it was a great idea when they wanted to give free 2-year degrees, free trade school degrees to everybody in America. Everybody who wanted to go to trade school, you could. But the outcry of people saying, well, I paid for college, why should they get a free ride? I'll never understand that greedy, selfish attitude. I walked 6 miles, so you shouldn't get a free bike. What the heck,
Yeah.
Can't you be happy for other people?
I tend to be more likely to think this bad thing happened to me, and for that reason I want to prevent it from happening to you. Why isn't that a more common orientation?
I donate to 2 charities. And one of them, I actually get ticked off when I see people in brand new luxury cars and wearing a $200 watch come in to get a freebie. It ticks me off. I can't say anything, but I want to say, hey, sell the car before you come here asking for a handout. But let me also say that that's rare. For the most part, people are ashamed to take a handout in this country. So when they need it, we should be there to help them,
Actually, one of the things this country remembers very well is Ronald Reagan talking about a welfare queen who owned 5 Cadillacs and was still going down and picking up welfare under a number of different names. That person was never actually identified. She was an apocryphal story. This is something I can imagine happening within our welfare system. And, Trump is pointing to Medicaid or Medicare fraud. And I believe there is fraud in the system. I believe there's fraud in every system. I don't think you can build a system that doesn't have fraud in it. But I've been thinking a lot about this with ICE as well. There's a cartoon that goes all the way back to 1941. This is a Warner Brothers cartoon from 1941 called The Mouse Menace. And in this hilarious cartoon that I watched as a child, a guy finds a mouse in his house and he goes after the mouse. It's kind of a Tom and Jerry thing, but before Tom and Jerry. And he goes after the mouse with a shotgun, with hand grenades, with a flamethrower, and he never can get the mouse. Eventually the mouse leaves because the house has been utterly destroyed. And that's kind of where we're at now. Yeah, border crossings are way down because America is a terrible place to be right now. Sending SWAT teams in. Remember that crossing the border without permission is a misdemeanor the first time. And the second time, it's a nonviolent felony. That does not justify masked SWAT teams, and it certainly doesn't justify shooting people. And it absolutely doesn't justify shooting people for taking pictures. So, we're living mouse menace right now. We're burning down our house because we don't like mice. I don't care if you think there are too many visitors from South America in this country, if you think there's too many immigrants, or even if you just think illegal immigrants, well, they broke a law. They did, a misdemeanor law. And they're doing terrible things here, like changing light bulbs and mowing lawns and keeping your crop prices down, your food prices. So thank God we're going after them, but we still don't need a SWAT team. This is like sending stormtroopers in after litter bugs. And by no accident, this is becoming Trump's personal army. That's something people need to think about. My beef isn't with ICE, actually. I'm not on the let's abolish ICE team. I'm on the let's get ICE back to a professional, appropriately sized, law-abiding department team.
Now, when you're talking about money, how it affects people, and our lack of sympathy and empathy with others, you've got to include the homeless. We've talked about the homeless before, so I don't want to get a big rant of that. But, excuse me, but Is there a way to pull them out of the misery that they live in? I will say this. Years ago, a guy named President Carter established 10,000 mental health clinics around America, walk-ins. But Reagan got rid of them all. Now there are 65,000 homeless in LA alone. And it's estimated that 30% have mental issues. These people could be productive in society. We want to get as many, if you want to get more money, you got to get your society to have more money. So help these people out of this situation. Your thought on that?
A bunch of things. And by the way, I have been homeless in the past. One is that this is different than in the past. A lot of the people living in tent cities, in San Francisco, apparently like 90% of the people living in tent cities have jobs. But the jobs don't pay enough to pay rent. And this is why I keep returning to the idea of a living wage, something which is both regionally and inflation adjusted, so that at 40 hours a week, one individual is above the poverty line. That should be the absolute minimum that we allow employers to pay. Less than that, and you, the taxpayer, are subsidizing the difference. The reason Walmart can pay people so little money is because your taxes are paying for their benefits. Republicans love to say, if people are working, they shouldn't be collecting benefits. And I agree, but that means they have to get a wage that keeps them above the poverty line. Right now, we have the worst of both. We have people getting punished for getting minimum wage jobs, and yet those minimum wage jobs don't even provide enough that they aren't homeless. So that's one thing. Another thing is that you often hear people complaining, well, I have to work for my dollars. Why don't they work for their dollars? You know what? Let's make some day jobs for people who can do work. I used to do day work. That was how I got out of being homeless, actually, was I would go down and do pickup work. And there's a lot of work that we could subsidize at the system level. We need litter cleared off the streets. We need graffiti cleaned off of walls. We need trash picked up, things like that. There are a lot of jobs that we could do. To this day, Republicans revile the WPA, but the WPA did a bunch of things. It got us things like the Hoover Dam that we're still using. It kept people working so they didn't lose the momentum of being in the workforce, and it taught them skills. They were constructing the infrastructure, like the highways and stuff, of this country. And so now when people are out of work, they lose the will to work, they lose their health, and so it can be harder for them to return to work, and they lose the skill sets that are involved. And at the same time, the Pentagon during the Bush administration made the case that the greatest threat to America's security is our crumbling infrastructure. So why don't we put people to work on the infrastructure, give them work that's respectable, that builds skills, and that teaches them to be part of the workforce?
That's about all we have time for this week. We didn't answer any questions. We'll make sure we do next time. I want to thank you all for listening, for viewing. Hope you enjoyed the show. I'm Pete Christensen.
I'm Coffee Brown.
And remember,
Don't die dumb.